Well, unions in the New South Wales private and public sector will protest outside state parliament today ahead of the unveiling of the state budget in a few hours' time. Frontline workers, including nurses, teachers and police, will rally against the Premier's policy of keeping wages 2 percentage points below inflation, cutting incomes by thousands of dollars in terms of real wages per year. Joining us live now is the Secretary of Unions New South Wales, Mark Morey. Mark, isn't it a bit late for a protest, given the numbers are going to be handed down in a few hours' time?
This is a long campaign. We've been running this for a number of years now. This is a government that is now baking in wage cuts to the essential services and essential services workers in our state. But what's more concerning is because the government is not keeping up with the rate of inflation, we're now seeing health workers, teachers, public sector workers in key areas leaving New South Wales to find other states where they get better pay and they can actually walk to work and afford a house.
The Fair Work Commission just raised the minimum wage, though, to 5.2%. Is that not enough?
5.2 is up there with inflation, but what this government is offering is 3%. And let's not forget, 2 years ago, it handed down a 0.3% pay cut to workers in New South Wales. So 2 years ago, workers were already going backwards. The government is now baking in a massive wage cut for workers in New South Wales. And it's not just the public sector. These wage cuts have an effect and downward pressure on private sector wages as well. We've got an economy that needs to grow. The government is not doing the heavy lifting to make sure that the economy flourishes and we retain skilled workers in New South Wales.
But when it comes to raising the minimum wage, doesn't that flow on to other sectors? So ultimately, in the long run, you'll get more anyway.
Well, that's for the low paid. What we are seeing is highly skilled teachers, health workers, professionals in New South Wales who are saying, I have to drive 2 hours to work. I can't afford to buy a house in Sydney. They're looking at other states. As the pressures grow, we are going to lose skilled workers from New South Wales. It'll put our health and education systems and the public sector more broadly under pressure. Right. And there'll be a crisis in relation to being able to deliver services in this state.
Well, OK, well, on that point of home ownership, the shared equity scheme will apply to some of the people who you are protesting for today. Do you support that?
Look, I welcome any initiative that makes it easier for workers to buy a house. It's a new initiative. We'll have to see how it goes, but certainly at least people are trying to do something to address home ownership. But the best way you can address home ownership is to give people a pay rise so they can pay their bills and buy a house.
When it comes to health, the government had also already announced 10,000 extra medical staff to be recruited. That's to help alleviate the crisis in our hospitals. Also $3,000 appreciation payments. I mean, there's not too many other sectors who are getting that.
Well, there's a whole lot of workers who work through COVID who are essential workers who aren't getting the $3,000 bonus. What that says to me, this is a government who hasn't done workforce planning. It is petrified it's going to lose a lot of skilled staff because they can't retain them. And so they're trying to throw some money at them to retain them. But over the longer term, over the last 10 years, we've had a wages cap in this state, which has driven down wages, hasn't enabled any productivity benefits to be realised. And now we're in a situation where the Premier is trying to find 10,000 health workers who don't exist. My understanding is the 5,000 promised in the last election campaign for health workers. We don't know if they've even hit that level, that number yet. So I don't know where all these people are coming from, but the government's left it too little too late.
OK, but just a final one here. To get a wage rise that's in line with inflation, which is basically what you're after, it's going to cost the government some $5 billion over 4 years. Do you think, or do you concede that there are limits to what can be afforded right now?
Oh, I'm realistic. Of course there are. But what this government needs to do and hasn't done is realise any productivity gains over the last 10 years. Their wages cap has put a constraint on workers who have just said, we'll take the cap, we don't want to lose conditions. And so for 10 years, we've seen no productivity gains in this state. There are offsets to be made, but the government's unwilling to negotiate properly and to ensure that we get offsets to pay for wage increases. It can be done.
OK, Mark, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.